Hey there guys, I'm SonicGhost, and today we are here to unbox the physical release of Shantae Advance Risky Revolution for the Game Boy Advance. This game here being released on the original hardware is a very historic piece of video game history, as Shantae Advance was originally going to come out on the Game Boy Advance back in the early 2000s, but this game was sadly canceled, and WayForward from there moved on to the next Shantae entry to release on the DSiWare service in 2010 with Shantae Risky's Revenge. So years and years later, this is a good 20 years after this game was canceled, we've seen the release of Shantae Advance Risky Revolution on the original Game Boy Advance hardware, thanks to WayForward partnering with Limited Run Games. This version of Shantae Advance was released in April of 2025. And I have the physical release here in front of us that we're going to be taking a look at today on the Game Boy Advance. Now, at the time of filming this video, this is the only way you can play this entry of Shantae. There is going to be an HD port of Shantae Advance to all modern systems, so PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and the PC later this summer. So this game does have a couple month head start on the Game Boy Advance original hardware, which is very, very significant. Before we go any further into this unboxing, I need to thank my good friend Matt's LP Adventures for helping me secure a copy of this said release, as I was not able to secure my own copy in time for the said original pre-order window. Matt helped me out pre-ordering this game, and I'm very thankful for his help. Without him, we wouldn't be looking at the Shantae Advance game on the original hardware. So thank you to my good friend Matt's LP Adventures for helping me secure a copy of Shantae Advance. But let's go ahead and actually start to unbox this said physical release. So taking a look at the game here up close, we got ourselves some nice artwork of Shantae in the Game Boy Advance style. So this is actually very significant because this is the new modern look that Shantae has with newer games, but designed for her second entry, as this is now officially the second entry in the overall Shantae series. We can see on the side here of the box, it does say only from Limited Run Games, and there is a little bit of controversy about this specifically being partnered with Limited Run, which we'll talk about later in this unboxing. But for right now, this is how it looks. We can see on the bottom here, in the bottom right hand corner, we got the company name, but also we have the Boson name here right next to Shantae. So nice love from the original creator here of the Shantae series, having his name also featured on the box. If we go ahead and look at the sides here, we can see the logo on the sides of the box. If we flip over to the other side here, we got the Shantae image up here on the top corner, and if we flip the spine, you can even see the name spelled out in a format you would have seen Game Boy Advance games back in the day on their said boxes. We can see more logos down here from Retro Collection and Limited Run. Flip around to the other spine, and it's the same deal as on the top, although we do have a WayForward and a Limited Run set of logos on this side. Look at the bottom, nothing there, but really just doesn't need to be everything on every side of the box. We take a look at the back here, and we have a description of the game along with some screenshots here of the game as well, running on the original hardware. And this game, very ambitious for a Game Boy Advance. This is a full-fledged game, but also it does have a 4-player multiplayer mode, which was not a thing, I believe, at the time of them showing off some Shantae Advance footage back in the 2000s. This was an idea from remaking the game in today's modern era, which is a really nice thing to see. A multiplayer mode in a Shantae game in general. That is the first for this said series. But I think without any further ado, it's time for us to open this said game, because I really do want to take a look at the actual hardware that they used for the cartridge, as this game has some controversy right now, specifically about what they used to produce these cartridges, as there's some questionable material in the cart, which I'll be taking a look at the cartridge itself after we unbox the actual game, because I want to actually open up the cartridge and take a look at the inside of it. So before we get to that step, we want to get into the actual box, just like so. And as you can see, this whole time I've been using this little stand that came included with Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. It's a nice little pre-order bonus for Best Buy. Kind of like the perfect stand for a box of this size. So it kind of just works out as a little display piece. But now with the box actually opened up, we want to go ahead and slide out the contents. So right on the top here, we have our physical release of Shantae Advance. I should mention this is just the standard version of the game. So we do have a purple cartridge. If you got the collector's edition of Shantae Advance on the Game Boy Advance, it came in a gold cartridge instead of the purple. In my opinion, I think the purple cartridge looks better. The gold one doesn't really fit the Shantae theme, and it looks a little tacky by comparison. So I'm glad that this version that I have is in a purple cartridge instead. So before we look at the cartridge, here is the instruction manual. It's the only other thing in the box, and it's themed just like an instruction manual from a Game Boy Advance game back in the 2000s when these games were originally being printed. So, opening it up, we got a history lesson of the franchise. We got a little story synopsis here. Some nice artwork. The whole thing is in color, which is very appreciated. Some Game Boy Advance games didn't even have fully colored manual like this back in the 2000s. So it's nice to see that this here is a fully colored manual with a lot of different screenshots from the Shantae Advance game. Very, very detailed. Pretty useful guide here for some of the stuff that you'll be dealing with in the Shantae game in general. So that's helpful. They even tell you how to troubleshoot some of the stuff with battle mode. As we can see here, there's a lot of different steps for troubleshooting, as playing any multiplayer game on original hardware can be a little tricky. But at least they tell you how to fix some of the common issues. Little character synopsis here of some of the main characters you'll see throughout your adventure in the game. And on the back, got the limited run logo along with Shantae herself and some more copyright trademarks here. No notes section, but realistically, are you ever going to actually write notes in one of these instruction booklets? That might have been a common theme in these booklets back in the day, but realistically, no one wants to ruin the condition of these pages by writing notes inside of it. You're better off nowadays using a standalone piece of paper, or better yet, probably something like your phone to take notes instead. So that is the instruction booklet. Again, nothing left here in the box, so we can put that aside, which won't stay up, so I'm just gonna put it down. And here, this box doesn't have anything in it. It's just to secure the cartridge here in shipping. So now we can take this out of the protective sleeve and take a look at the physical release of Shantae Advance. This here is a very nice looking cartridge when it comes to that purple. It's a translucent purple too, which is a nice attention to detail. Got the logo of the game, copyright trademarks from the company and all that. Flip around to the back here, and it's a standard tri-wing screwdriver like any other Nintendo game to get in. And you got the logo of Limited Run passing through the back of the cartridge. I do feel that there is actually a piece of protective film. I'll give Limited credit for this. This protective piece of film, it's a nice little touch because that keeps the cartridge nice and clean. So when you go to use it, you must take this off, as this little piece of protective film will get in the way of your Game Boy cartridge slot when trying to put this into original hardware. So take that off before you play the game. Now if we get this back to focus, there we go, our camera's now back in focus. Took a minute. Now we can take a look at the cartridge up close, and now we can see the shine that is on this bottom piece, which can be a little bit of a fingerprint magnet, I will admit, but that is kind of the case with glossy plastic in general. It wipes right off, so it's not really a problem. But this is the cartridge here. in all of its glory. I do like seeing all of the custom branding on it from Limited Run instead of seeing Game Boy Advance on here. A lot of reproduction carts of newer releases on original hardware go this route where publishers put their names on the cartridges instead of the original trademark logos from Nintendo, for example. So, nice looking cart. But now I want to go deeper and take a look at this cartridge up close and personal before I plug it into my Game Boy Advance. Okay, so now we're over at my desk, so I can take a closer look at the internals here of this Shantae Advance cartridge. I'm a little concerned about some of the parts that Limited Run and by extension their partner company Retrobit used in this cartridge, as there were claims that the Shantae Advance cartridge here is an FPGA board, which is concerning to some people due to battery life, but the bigger concern is the use of recycled chips. Recycled chips may be a common practice for a lot of electronics over in a place like China, for example, but this is a brand new video game on original hardware. So for it to use recycled components and for a Limited Run to charge as much as they do for these carts, as you would imagine, people are very upset. Plus, some of these cartridges have been coming with imperfections or just dirt on the chips in the cart itself. So if you can, it is worth to open up your physical release of Shantae Advance and open up the cartridge as well to examine it. And thankfully, as we've shown in the main unboxing part, this just uses a standard tri-wing screwdriver. I have some Game Boy Advance games here as a reference. This here is my childhood copy of Super Mario Advance on the Game Boy Advance. And as you can see here, it's using the same tri-wing screw that Limited is using on their cartridge here for Shantae. So I can open it up, thankfully, as I do have a lot of different screwdriver bits here in a iFixit kit that I own. So thankfully, it's pretty easy for me to take a look at what in this said cartridge, which is very important because this kind of cartridge, because of you paying as much as you do, waiting for a very long time for it to show up in the mail, you want to make sure everything is kosher. And this game has made headlines for all of the wrong reasons. So, yeah, as you can imagine, I want to make sure that things are okay. So, this here is the bit that we need to use. It is very hard to see on camera, but this here is a tri-wing bit. So, this is all we need to open up our copy of Shantae. So, just going to line up the screwdriver here. It's going to be very hard to see all this because my hand will have to cover up the camera, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Here we go. Got the screw out. So there it is. Just make sure you have the right bit size here. I had to go one size smaller than anticipated, but still, it is a tri-wing screwdriver. Keep that in mind. This is a tri-wing screw. You don't want to use anything else in fear of stripping the screw. Specifically, the bit in used here, which is going to be very hard to see once again on the camera, is a Y0 bit. That is what you need to use in order to get this cartridge open. It is a Y0 bit. But we got it open now. So let's just go ahead and pop out the internals, which for Game Boy Advance games, the top just slides forward and then it just releases. So this here is the cartridge. And I do apologize for some of the more shaky work. I have to use this camera upside down. So it's a little hard to see. So this here is the cartridge, and these are the chips in question, which, yeah, don't look the cleanest to me. They are looking a little off. And if I can take out the cart here so we can take a look at the back of the PCB, then we can see the rest of the information here. There's the Limited Run logo we saw through the cartridge. And we got some of the other brandings here for the different capacitors and such on the card. I'm not the most knowledgeable on this, so I apologize if certain things come off maybe a little inaccurate, but I am trying my best here. This chip alone tells you how much it cost them. It's a $2 chip, apparently. I do believe that's supposed to be $2. Okay, that's kind of bold to put that right on the cartridge. So I'm going to want to take a Q-tip to this and see if anything comes off, because a lot of people reported that these chips are kind of dirty coming out of the box. This one looks okay, but I will still take a Q-tip to this and see for myself. Okay, so now we're going to take some rubbing alcohol to the chips here on this cartridge. I got 91% isopropyl alcohol. If you're cleaning any kind of motherboard or electronic as a whole, you want 90% or higher if you're going to use isopropyl alcohol. Keep that in mind, as this stuff dries almost instantaneously. Hence why you don't want to use anything else like, say, 70%, which is more common. So I got some here in my Q-tip. I'm going to now clean off some of the stuff here on the chips just so I can see if anything rubs off on this said Q-tip. And yeah, sure enough, there is some dirt on this cartridge. Even though this came fresh from a factory, it does have dirt on it. That is not what should be happening here. These are brand new produced cartridges, never before plugged into any hardware, maybe for like a couple minutes at most at a factory to make sure these boot. But outside of maybe some testing at a factory, these games are not supposed to have dirt like this right out of the box. These are not used cartridges. They're brand new. And yet, this has dirt like from a cartridge I could have got from years ago, 10 plus years ago. This is stuff I've seen on my cartridges I've had since the early 2000s. This is unacceptable to see on a brand new cart. I want to see if the pins have anything too, so take a cleaner side. So we're not going to take the gunk side, we're going to take a cleaner side here. And we're going to use that part of the Q-tip, clean the pin heads here that actually go into a Game Boy Advance cartridge slot to make sure that this here is also clean, or is this dirty too? You can see a little bit of stuff on the Q-tip. It's a little harder to notice on the camera, but it's very faint, so it's not as dirty as the chips, as you can see here with a nice brown on my Q-tip. But if I go over to the side I used on the pins, it's not as bad, but there's still something there. You can clearly see if I have the Q-tip on its side. So, yeah, I don't know why these chips are coming dirty. These are brand new games, but yet these chips here, being recycled parts, are a pretty big concern for retro gamers. And I can agree to that testament, because you don't want to have recycled components in a brand new game, because you don't know how used these chips are. You don't know if they have a lifespan of 20 plus years, or if these are going to be something that only lasts for maybe 1 year. You don't know the conditions of these chips. And because of them just being used in general and coming dirty right from the factory, you know that these were sourced from stuff heavily used. So this here is a major problem in my opinion, and I'm not the biggest fan of Limited Run and their partner company for making the physical releases here, Retrobit, to have used parts on these cartridges. That is not acceptable for the high premium you're paying to get this game on original hardware. This is just unacceptable behavior, and they need to be held accountable, in my honest opinion. At least do something to make this right for people who bought these cartridges, because some people don't even want to use this on their hardware, thinking these chips could be so far used, it could even damage their hardware. And Limited Run has been in a lot of trouble over these past few years with some of their retro games, like this original hardware piece not working on the original hardware, and in some cases even destroying original hardware, like with an NES release not too long ago. So I expect better from a company charging, for the cost of just this game alone, this was $60 USD. And for them to use recycled components on the chip and charge $60 for this is very, very unacceptable, in my opinion. This is, at this point, par for the course for limited run games. That's why, again, they have been in the headlines for a very long time for stuff like this. But it's still just sad to see by today's standards. But let's just go ahead and put this game back together, which it goes back together the same way it came apart. So you just slide the top piece back in, and then from there, make sure everything's lined up, get your screw, put it back together, and now your game is ready to be played on your Game Boy Advance. So there you go. That was the physical cartridge just taken apart. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be plugging this into a Game Boy Advance and make sure this copy works perfectly fine and boots up. Okay, so now I'm booting up my Nintendo GameCube here so we can take a look at how the Shantae Advance Game Boy Advance game runs on the original hardware. So I'm going to be using the Game Boy player here to showcase the Shantae Advance game running, at least until we get to the title screen. And you may be asking, why is he playing Wind Waker? That's not the Game Boy player. While I could use the Game Boy player startup disc, I have another way of playing Game Boy games through the Game Boy player, and it's through the Game Boy interface. There are many different ways to load up the Game Boy interface. Since I don't have a SD memory card for the GameCube just to run custom software, I opt to use a custom save file that just loads into the Game Boy player, and I'm using a copy of Wind Waker to do so. So now I want to hit the start button. It's going to try to load the game, and in an instant it's going to run code that will launch the Game Boy player interface. So now we're in the Game Boy player interface here through a homebrew method, the Game Boy interface, or GCI, and now we're playing the physical release of Shantae Advance on original hardware. Here's the game in all of its glory, working as intended on a Game Boy Advance. This is a very impressive thing to see, and I'm glad to know that even though this cartridge did come dirty from the factory, just a little bit of cleaning on the pins itself, where some dirt was. I couldn't get the game to boot on first plug-in because of some of that dirt, but once I cleaned it up, now the game is working perfectly fine on my Game Boy Advance systems and my Game Boy player here via the Nintendo GameCube. So this is Shantae Advance Risky Revolution running on the original hardware through the cartridge. It looks really nice here, and I'm very excited to play this version of the game on original hardware. But there you have it. That is the physical release of Shantae Advance Risky Revolution on the original Game Boy Advance hardware. I will say, even though Limited Run is a questionable company nowadays by people's standards, and some of the stuff they did with this cartridge I'm not the biggest fan of, I can give them credit for help fund this long lost game in the Shantae series. I always wanted to try to play one of the beta builds of Shantae Advance to see what this game could have been. So now to have a fully released version of this cancel game on original hardware is a very big deal. And if you don't want to play this on original hardware, it is going to be available for modern systems very soon. So you can still play this in any format you would like nowadays, which, again, for a game that was considered lost media for the past 2 decades, to see a fully functional and complete version of the game on the original hardware, no less, is very impressive. So with that all said, that's gonna do it for today's unboxing video. Now if you excuse me, I have some Shantae Advance to play after all of these years of wondering what this game could have been. Now, it's more of a question of how much am I going to enjoy this said release on the Game Boy Advance. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.